I never thought I'd be standing here, watching my business partner's mother sobbing over his suicide note while holding the flash drive that would expose him to everyone. 3 months earlier, Jason had drained our tech startup's accounts of $2.7 million and disappeared, leaving me to face our investors, employees, and the FBI alone. I lost everything: my company, my home in Seattle, even my reputation in the tech community I'd spent a decade building. But I knew something no one else did. Jason wasn't dead, and I had proof. I tracked him to a beach in Costa Rica, living under a new name with my money. When his mother called about the memorial service, I almost didn't come. But here I was, watching his family mourn a man who betrayed everyone who trusted him, including me, his fiancée. The flash drive in my pocket contained everything: offshore account numbers, emails planning his exit, and GPS coordinates of his current location. As his sister stepped up to read his final words, I felt the weight of that little device in my hand. In 5 minutes, everyone would know the truth. I met Jason Kaplan 6 years ago at a Seattle tech incubator event. We were both recent transplants to the Pacific Northwest, me from Chicago with a background in AI development, him from Boston with experience in venture capital. We clicked immediately. Two ambitious 30-somethings with complementary skills and a shared vision for creating intuitive, smart home technology that would actually improve lives, not just collect data. Our company, Nest Logic, grew from late-night coding sessions in my Fremont apartment to a proper office in South Lake Union with 40 employees. Jason had the connections and charm that opened doors with investors. I had the technical expertise and product vision. Perfect partners, everyone said. We were featured in GeekWire, invited to speak at SXSW, and courted by the big players. Microsoft even approached us about acquisition. My parents were thrilled. My father, a retired electrical engineer from Boeing, finally stopped asking when I'd get a real job. My mother, who'd spent 30 years teaching high school math, proudly told her friends her daughter was the next Bill Gates. They even invested $50,000 of their retirement savings in our Series B round, against my protests. Jason and I became more than business partners. After a company retreat to Olympic National Park 2 years ago, our relationship evolved. We moved into a waterfront condo in Belltown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. We hosted dinner parties for potential investors where I'd cook my grandmother's pierogi recipe while Jason charmed them with growth projections. We planned weekend getaways to Vancouver and Portland. We talked about children. His family embraced me immediately. His mother, Barbara, a pediatrician from Newton, Massachusetts, called me every Sunday. His sister, Rebecca, a corporate attorney in New York, became my confidant. Even his stoic father, Martin, who'd built a successful construction business from nothing, would call occasionally just to check how his kids were doing. They were the warm, tight-knit Jewish family I'd always envied, so different from my reserved Polish-American parents who expressed love through practicality rather than affection. Last Thanksgiving, we hosted both families in Seattle. I watched Jason effortlessly bridge the cultural gap, getting my quiet father to laugh at his jokes and drawing out my mother's stories about growing up in Chicago's Polish community. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Jason proposed on our balcony with the Space Needle glittering in the background. The ring was his grandmother's, a family heirloom Barbara had saved for the right person. 2 months later, Nest Logic secured our biggest investment yet, $4.5 million, to scale our flagship product. We celebrated at Canlis, drinking champagne and planning our future. Jason suggested we postpone the wedding until after the product launch. "Let's knock this out of the park first," he said, "then we'll have the wedding of the century." I didn't know then that he'd already started moving money. Small amounts at first, testing the waters. Our CFO later showed me the trail, transfers disguised as vendor payments to shell companies. By the time I noticed discrepancies in our accounts, Jason had been laying groundwork for months. He'd created an elaborate exit strategy while sleeping beside me every night, while planning our wedding, while having Sunday dinners with my parents. They were the warm, tight-knit Jewish family I'd always envied, so different from my reserved Polish-American parents who expressed love through practicality rather than affection. Last Thanksgiving, we hosted both families in Seattle. I watched Jason effortlessly bridge the cultural gap, getting my quiet father to laugh at his jokes and drawing out my mother's stories about growing up in Chicago's Polish community. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Jason proposed on our balcony with the Space Needle glittering in the background. The ring was his grandmother's, a family heirloom Barbara had saved for the right person. 2 months later, Nest Logic secured our biggest investment yet, $4.5 million, to scale our flagship product. We celebrated at Canlis, drinking champagne and planning our future. Jason suggested we postpone the wedding until after the product launch. "Let's knock this out of the park first," he said. "Then we'll have the wedding of the century." I didn't know then that he'd already started moving money. Small amounts at first, testing the waters. Our CFO later showed me the trail, transfers disguised as vendor payments to shell companies. By the time I noticed discrepancies in our accounts, Jason had been laying groundwork for months. He'd created an elaborate exit strategy while sleeping beside me every night, while planning our wedding, while having Sunday dinners with my parents. The night before he disappeared, he brought home my favorite macarons from that little bakery in Pike Place Market and suggested we take a weekend trip to Whidbey Island to decompress. He kissed me goodbye the next morning as I left for a meeting with our development team. That was the last time I saw him, until I tracked him down on that Costa Rican beach with the help of a private investigator I'd hired with the last of my savings. The morning Jason vanished started like any other Tuesday. We had our coffee on the balcony, discussing the product demo scheduled for Friday with Microsoft's acquisition team. He seemed distracted, but blamed it on pre-meeting jitters. I remember kissing him goodbye, his stubble rough against my cheek, the familiar scent of his sandalwood cologne. By noon, our world imploded. Our CFO, Mandy, called me out of a developer meeting, her voice shaking. "We need to talk, now." In her office, she pulled up our company accounts, 0 balances. Wire transfers had been initiated at 9:37 a.m. to a series of offshore accounts. The corporate credit cards were maxed out. Our payroll account was empty. "This has to be a mistake," I insisted, calling Jason repeatedly, straight to voicemail. I rushed back to our condo. His clothes were gone, passport missing, his side of the bathroom counter eerily clean. On the kitchen island sat my engagement ring with a post-it note. "I'm sorry. You deserve better." The next 24 hours were a blur of FBI agents, bank officials, and stunned employees. Our investors descended like vultures. The board called an emergency meeting where I learned Jason had forged my signature on several documents, giving him sole withdrawal authority. The company lawyer explained that while Jason would face criminal charges, the likelihood of recovering the money was slim. "What about our employees?" I asked. 40 people who'd trusted us with their livelihoods. The lawyer's expression said everything. By week's end, Nest Logic was finished. I stood in our empty office, watching our developers pack their desk plants and coffee mugs, avoiding my eyes. Some had mortgages, children, student loans. I'd failed them all. My parents lost their investment. My father, never emotional, broke down on the phone. "We trusted him because you did," he said, his voice cracking. The Seattle tech community, once our support system, now whispered about my naivety. How could I not have known? Was I involved? The FBI questioned me repeatedly, suspicious of my innocence. My bank accounts were frozen, credit cards canceled. The condo, in Jason's name, went into foreclosure. I moved into a studio apartment in Rainier Valley, the only place I could afford with what little cash I had left. My identity became that woman whose fiancé stole millions. The shame followed me like a shadow. I stopped going to industry events, declined calls from former colleagues, dodged reporters seeking the jilted fiancé angle for their tech scandal stories. 2 weeks after Jason disappeared, his mother called, sobbing. "Have you heard from him? Please, if you know anything." The anguish in her voice nearly broke me. I couldn't tell her I'd hired Eric, a former cybersecurity specialist from our company, to track her son. That we were following digital breadcrumbs through encrypted accounts and fake identities. The Kaplans were devastated. Barbara had been hospitalized briefly for anxiety. Martin looked decades older when I saw him on a video call. Rebecca flew to Seattle to help me clean out the condo before the bank took it. She held me while I cried, apologizing for her brother's betrayal. "You're still family to us," she insisted, helping me pack the few possessions I could keep. "Whatever Jason did, it doesn't change how we feel about you." Then came the text from Eric a month after Jason vanished. Found him, Tamarindo, Costa Rica, living under the name Michael Werner, sending coordinates and photos. The pictures showed Jason, tanned, relaxed, at a beachfront bar, another of him entering a luxury villa, a third with a woman I didn't recognize. I stared at them for hours, searching his face for remorse, for any sign of the man I thought I knew. I was preparing to send everything to the FBI when Barbara called again, her voice hollow, barely recognizable. "They found Jason's car at Lake Washington with a note. The police are searching the water, but..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "We're having a memorial service next week. Please come. You were the love of his life." The irony nearly made me laugh. While his family planned his funeral, Jason was sipping cocktails on a beach with my company's money. I almost told Barbara everything then. But something stopped me. Perhaps the raw grief in her voice, or maybe my own need to confront Jason's supporters face to face. So instead of forwarding Eric's evidence to the FBI, I copied everything to a flash drive. Bank transfers, location data, photographs, emails Jason had sent to his new identity months before his disappearance. Even a dating profile he'd created while still sleeping beside me every night. I added my own detailed account of events, then booked a flight to Boston for the memorial service. The night before I left, Rebecca called. "They found a letter addressed to everyone, family, friends, you. Mom wants to read it at the service." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's awful, Mia. He blames the company's failure for his depression, says he couldn't face disappointing everyone." She paused. "He mentions you specifically, says you'll be better off without him." The calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. Not only had he destroyed everything we built, but he was rewriting history to make himself the victim, using his family's grief to cement his escape. And now I was flying across the country to watch them mourn a man who was very much alive, planning his new life with money that had cost me everything. The memorial service was held at the Kaplan family's synagogue in Newton, a stately brick building with stained glass windows that cast prisms of color across the pews. I sat in the back, a stranger among mourners who knew Jason from childhood. Former classmates, college roommates, distant relatives, all united in grief for a man who'd engineered his own disappearance. Barbara spotted me and hurried over, enveloping me in a tearful embrace. "You came," she whispered, her body frail against mine. Martin nodded solemnly from a distance, his eyes hollow. Rebecca squeezed my hand as she passed, mouthing, "Thank you." The rabbi spoke of Jason's bright spirit and entrepreneurial vision. A childhood friend recounted stories of Jason's generosity. His college roommate described Jason's unwavering integrity. Each eulogy twisted the knife deeper. The Jason they described bore no resemblance to the man who'd methodically drained our accounts while planning wedding venues with me. Then Barbara approached the podium, trembling, clutching a letter. "Jason left this for us," she said, her voice breaking. "His final thoughts. My hand closed around the flash drive in my pocket as Barbara began to read. "To my beloved family and friends," she read. "By the time you read this, I will have found peace from the unbearable weight I've carried. The failure of Nest Logic crushed me. I couldn't face you all knowing I'd let you down." Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the congregation. I dug my fingernails into my palms. The pressure of running a startup proved too much. The financial strain, the responsibility for our employees, it consumed me. I made desperate choices trying to save what we built. Barbara paused, composing herself before continuing. "To Mia, I'm sorry I wasn't the partner you deserved. You'll rebuild, stronger without my weakness holding you back. Your brilliance was always the heart of Nest Logic. I was just riding your coattails." The audacity nearly made me laugh out loud. Several heads turned toward me, eyes brimming with pity. "Please don't blame yourselves. This decision brings me peace after months of turmoil. Remember me as I was before failure changed me. With eternal love, Jason." The synagogue fell silent. Barbara clutched the letter to her chest, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Martin stared blankly ahead, a statue of grief. Something inside me snapped. 6 months of humiliation, financial ruin, and FBI interrogations crystallized into perfect clarity. I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That's not true," I said, my voice echoing through the hushed synagogue. All eyes turned to me, some confused, others alarmed. Rebecca shook her head slightly, signaling me to sit down. "Jason didn't kill himself," I continued, walking slowly toward the front. "He stole $2.7 million from our company and disappeared. He's alive." Gasps rippled through the congregation. Barbara stared at me in horror. "Mia, grief affects us all differently," the rabbi began gently. "This isn't grief," I replied, pulling out the flash drive. "This is evidence. Jason is living in Costa Rica under the name Michael Werner. I have bank records, photographs, everything." I connected the flash drive to the laptop that had been used for the photo slideshow of Jason's life. My hand steady now, I pulled up the most recent photograph. Jason lounging on a beach, dated 3 days earlier, timestamp visible in the corner. Barbara's knees buckled. Martin caught her before she hit the floor. The congregation erupted in confused murmurs. "He emptied our company accounts, maxed out our credit lines, and disappeared," I continued, advancing through the evidence methodically. "He left 40 employees without jobs or final paychecks. He cost investors millions. My parents lost their retirement savings. I lost my home, my reputation, everything." I displayed the bank transfers, each one highlighting the systematic theft Jason had orchestrated. This suicide note is his final con. He knew someone might eventually track him down, so he created an escape route, one paved with your sympathy and grief. Rebecca had joined her parents now, her legal mind processing the evidence faster than most. Her face transformed from shock to dawning comprehension to rage. "I didn't come here to hurt you," I said, addressing the Kaplans directly. "You're victims in this too, but I couldn't let him use your grief to secure his freedom." The synagogue had fallen completely silent. Martin stood, his face ashen. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "About a month," I admitted. "I hired someone to track him. I was going to send everything to the FBI, but then Barbara called about the memorial service." Martin nodded slowly, understanding my choice to deliver the truth in person. I ejected the flash drive and placed it in his weathered hand. "Everything's here. Bank accounts, current location, evidence of premeditation. What you do with it is your decision." I turned to Barbara, still supported by Rebecca. "I'm sorry. Not for revealing the truth, but for the pain it causes. Jason betrayed us all." With that, I walked down the center aisle, past the stunned faces of mourners recalibrating their understanding of a man they thought they knew. Outside, the October sun shone brilliantly against a clear blue Massachusetts sky. For the first time in months, I breathed freely. The weight of secrets finally lifted. Behind me, I heard the synagogue doors open. Footsteps approached rapidly. I turned to see Rebecca, her eyes fierce with determination. "Wait," she called. "We're not done yet." Rebecca caught up to me on the synagogue steps, her heels clicking against the stone. "The FBI needs to see this immediately," she said, clutching the flash drive. "I'm calling our family attorney. We'll make this right." I hadn't expected this, the immediate alignment with justice rather than family loyalty. She must have read the surprise on my face. "He's my brother, but what he did is unconscionable," she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Those employees, the investors, no one deserves what he did." We sat in her rental car while she made calls, first to the family attorney, then to an FBI contact from her days as a federal prosecutor. Within hours, I was sitting in the Boston FBI field office, recounting everything while agents copied the flash drive contents. "This changes the investigation completely," the lead agent told me. "We were treating this as potential corporate fraud followed by suicide. Now we're looking at an active fugitive case with substantial evidence." That night, I stayed with Rebecca in her hotel room. Neither of us could face the idea of returning to the Kaplan family home. Martin and Barbara had secluded themselves after the memorial service implosion, surrounded by close family friends. "They're in shock," Rebecca explained, pouring us both generous glasses of bourbon from the minibar. "But Dad's practical. Once the initial blow passes, he'll focus on making things right." She wasn't wrong. The next morning, Martin called, his voice gravelly but determined. "I spoke with the FBI. They're coordinating with Costa Rican authorities. Barbara needs time, but I want you to know we don't blame you. You showed more integrity today than my son has his entire life." 3 days later, Jason was arrested at his Costa Rican villa. The International Financial Crimes Task Force froze accounts across 5 countries. It wouldn't recover everything. He'd already spent nearly $1 million, but it was a start. The news exploded across tech media. "Nest Logic founder fakes suicide, captured in Costa Rica," read the GeekWire headline. My phone filled with messages from former employees, investors, industry contacts. Some supportive, others accusatory. Why hadn't I spotted the fraud sooner? Had I really been so oblivious? I returned to Seattle to find reporters camped outside my apartment building. I granted one interview to the Seattle Times, telling my side of the story, then retreated from public view. The FBI cleared me of any involvement, but the court of public opinion remained divided. Some saw me as the whistleblower who brought a fraudster to justice. Others viewed me as the clueless fiancé who should have known better. 2 weeks after Jason's arrest, I received an unexpected call from Diane Powell, Microsoft's head of acquisitions, the woman we'd been scheduled to meet the day Jason disappeared. "That was quite a roller coaster," she said without preamble, "but we're still interested in the technology. If you're willing to rebuild, we'd like to discuss options." The following day, I met Diane at Microsoft's campus in Redmond. She explained that while Nest Logic was defunct, my patents and technical architecture remained valuable. Microsoft offered to acquire the intellectual property and bring me on as project lead. "You developed something remarkable," Diane said. "Don't let his actions erase that." That night, I called my parents with the news. My father, who'd barely spoken since losing their investment, finally broke his silence. "I knew you'd land on your feet," he said, pride evident beneath his usual reserve. "You're resilient, like your grandmother who survived the war." Slowly, I rebuilt my life. The Microsoft position provided financial stability. I found a small house in Wallingford with a garden where I could grow the tomatoes and basil my Polish grandmother had taught me to nurture. Some former Nest Logic employees joined me at Microsoft. Others sent grateful messages when partial restitution from recovered funds finally arrived. 6 months after the memorial service, I flew back to Boston for Jason's arraignment. He'd been extradited to face multiple federal charges. The courtroom was packed with victims, investors, employees, even small vendors who'd been left unpaid in Nest Logic's collapse. When Jason entered in handcuffs, I barely recognized him. Gone was the confident tech executive with the disarming smile. His shoulders hunched forward. His eyes darted nervously around the room, landing briefly on me before quickly looking away. After the hearing, Barbara approached me in the courthouse corridor. She'd aged years and months, her physician's composure replaced by fragile uncertainty. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I believed in the son I thought I raised, not the man he became." "You don't owe me anything," I replied. "He fooled us all." She pressed something into my hand, the engagement ring I'd left behind. This belonged to my grandmother, who survived the Holocaust by hiding her jewelry in bread loaves. It represents resilience, not betrayal. It should stay with you. I tried to refuse, but she closed my fingers around it. "Sell it, donate it, whatever feels right, but you earned it more than he ever did." That evening, Rebecca invited me to dinner at her favorite North End restaurant. Over pasta and wine, she revealed she'd been investigating her brother's finances further. "He didn't act alone," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "There's a money trail connecting Jason to someone inside your investor group, Alex Whitman." Alex had been one of our earliest backers, a fixture at company events, always supportive, always interested in our development timeline. The documents showed communication between him and Jason dating back 18 months, planning not just the theft but corporate espionage, selling our proprietary technology to competitors while deliberately tanking the company. "The FBI has this?" I asked, scanning the evidence. "As of this morning," Rebecca confirmed. "They'll be making another arrest soon." She hesitated, then reached for my hand. "There's something else. I've accepted a position with a Seattle law firm. I'd like to stay connected, not just because of all this, but because you've become important to me." The gesture touched me deeply. From the ruins of betrayal, an unexpected friendship had formed. 1 year after Jason's disappearance, I stood on the Microsoft campus watching as our technology, now refined and expanded, was unveiled to the public. My team had grown to 15 engineers, all focused on making smart home technology that prioritized privacy and security. That evening, I walked along Alki Beach, watching the Seattle skyline illuminate against the darkening sky. I thought about the journey, from rising star to public failure to quiet redemption. I fingered the small pendant around my neck, crafted from Barbara's ring, transformed into something new that honored its history while creating distance from its painful associations. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Alex Whitman took a plea deal, full cooperation. Jason facing additional charges. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? In that moment, staring at the Seattle skyline that had witnessed both my greatest triumphs and deepest humiliations, I realized something profound. Jason hadn't just stolen money. He'd tried to steal my future, my confidence, my place in the world I'd worked so hard to build. For months, I'd let him succeed. No more. The woman who tracked down a fugitive, who stood in a synagogue full of mourners and spoke truth to power, who rebuilt from ashes, that was the real me. Not the naive partner, not the humiliated founder, but the resilient fighter who refused to let betrayal define her story. I texted Rebecca back. "Absolutely, I'm bringing champagne." Today marks 2 years since that memorial service in Boston. Jason is serving a 15-year federal sentence for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Most of our investors received partial restitution, including my parents. Our technology lives on in millions of homes across America, with my name on the patents. I lead a team of 30 engineers now, including 6 former Nest Logic employees. Rebecca moved to Seattle as planned. We meet for dinner every Sunday, a new tradition that's helped us both heal. Barbara visits quarterly, volunteering at a local clinic during her stays. Martin hasn't returned to Seattle yet, but we speak monthly. Broken bonds reformed into something different but meaningful. Sometimes people ask if I regret trusting Jason. I don't. Regret implies I'd choose differently if given the chance. But the betrayal, painful as it was, forced me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed. It taught me that resilience isn't about avoiding falls, it's about how you rise afterward. That flash drive I placed in Martin's hand didn't just expose a fraud, it freed me from the narrative Jason had written for me. It allowed me to reclaim my story. If you're facing your own betrayal, remember this. The person who hurts you doesn't get to decide your worth. Only you have that power. Trust again. Build again. Your greatest comeback might be waiting on the other side of your deepest hurt. If this story resonated with you, please hit the subscribe button below and share it with someone who needs to hear that betrayal isn't the end of their story. Leave a comment about your own experience with rebuilding after loss. I read every one. And join me next week when I'll share how I navigated the legal aftermath of corporate fraud. Until then, remember that your lowest moment might just be the foundation for your greatest triumph.